Hi, I'm Martin from Reedsy, and over the past 10 years we've helped over 100,000 writers make their publishing dreams come true. And in that time, I'd like to think that we've learned a thing or two about writing books that resonate with readers. Back in the 1990s, psychologists Barbara Fredrickson and Daniel Kahneman ran an experiment around colonoscopies. Now, before you turn off, stay with me for a second. I promise this is about writing. Patients underwent this invasive procedure and reported their discomfort throughout the whole thing. The researchers then compared what the patients experienced minute by minute with what they remembered afterwards. Fredrickson and Kahneman discovered that the patients didn't really remember how they felt on average during the procedure, or even how long it lasted. Their memory of the whole event was overwhelmingly determined by two moments: the peak of intensity and the end. So a longer procedure with a gentler final few minutes was remembered as better than a shorter one that ended abruptly, even though it contained objectively more total discomfort. They called this the peak end rule, and it's something that appears to govern how humans remember basically everything. A good holiday could be torpedoed by a miserable flight home, just as a mediocre one can be salvaged by good weather on the final few days. So it's the same for relationships and movies and books. As a writer, this may come as a relief or perhaps a lot of pressure. Readers won't remember your novel as the sum of all of its chapters. They'll remember its best moment and its last one. A saggy middle will be forgiven and forgotten, but a disappointing ending will dominate your reader's impression of your book. As someone who hopes that your book takes off, this is mega critical, because in general, the ending is the thing that will determine whether someone will recommend your book or want to read your next one. It's kind of rare for people to press a novel into their friends' hands because they think they'll really enjoy chapter 12. They often do it because of how it ended and how it made them feel when they closed the cover. In that sense, your final 10 pages are as crucial to marketing your book as your Facebook ads or your TikTok feed. So today, I'm going to give you 7 types of endings that readers genuinely love, with examples of each of them. Spoiler alerts for these following books and movies, but if you're game, let's get on with it. When I say that I'm going to give you 7 ways to end your book, it sounds like I'm about to hand you a list of recipes, but I don't really want to just give you 7 recipes that you can choose from for the rest of your life. I want to share with you the principles that underpin how all great food is made, literarily speaking. So here it is. Every ending is an answer, and every story opens by asking questions. Often there's an obvious question: will she survive? Will they get together? Who did the murder? But underneath this plotty question, there should be a deeper question. Will this person change? Can they heal their inner wound? What does it cost to live a good life? And I think that an ending satisfies when it answers that deeper question there. It doesn't necessarily need to be a happy ending or black and white, but 9 times out of 10, a good ending will answer that question honestly, in a way that's on topic. When an ending feels botched, it tends to answer only one question, and very often, it's the wrong question. They answer the plot question, the battle is won, the bomb is defused, and they leave the real question, the human question, hanging in the air. Those readers will close the book feeling like Peggy Lee with a strange deflated sense of, is that all there is? So, 7 types of answers to your story questions. Let's start with the one that everyone thinks is easy. 1. The earned happy ending. The happily ever after has a bad reputation amongst people who want you to know that they've studied literature. Dismissed as wish fulfillment, as commercial, as easy, and that reputation is absolute nonsense, because a genuinely earned happy ending is one of the hardest tricks in fiction, and the operative word there is earned. Let's crack open one of our favourite chestnuts, Pride and Prejudice. Elizabeth and Darcy end the novel rich, married, and blissful at Pemberley. As happy an ending as exists in the canon of English literature, but it works because Austen has made the characters pay for that ending. Before either of them can have the other, each must be humiliated into self-knowledge. Darcy's first proposal is thrown back into his face with an itemized list of his failings. Elizabeth is forced by a letter to re-evaluate every judgment she was proudest of. The joy of the ending is directly proportional to the mortification leading up to it. You see, I think readers weigh joy by how much it costs. An ending where happiness simply falls into our characters' laps because the obstacles dissolve is fully empty, right? You see, the question that this ending answers is, can these people change enough to deserve this? And the answer must be visibly yes, they did. And it wasn't easy for them. 2. The Bittersweet Victory. Now for the ending, which many readers, if pressed, would name as their favourite feeling in all of fiction. The victory that comes at the cost of something irreplaceable. The sort of great classic example of this is Frodo at the end of Lord of the Rings. The quest succeeds, the Shire is saved, and Frodo, as the person who saves it, discovers that he cannot live in it. So he takes a ship out into the west. You see, it's a happy ending, but one that comes at a price that means that Frodo can't spend the next 100 years smoking his pipe in the Shire like his uncle did. Or let's look at a different genre. In The Fault in Our Stars, we have love genuinely found by our hero, meaning genuinely created, and yet the boy still dies because it's a book about cancer. This kind of ending is powerful because it allows the readers to feel two different things at once: sadness and hope, grief and gratitude. It's a richer emotional experience the way that a chord sounds fuller than a single note being played. Bittersweet endings are still satisfying for the same reason that earned happy endings are satisfying, because it acknowledges something we all know to be true, that it's rare to find an unconditional victory where everything works out amazingly at no cost or at a cost that we can happily bear. So the question it asks is this worth it? And the answer is yes, and this is what it costs. 3. The tragedy that still satisfies. So this raises the next obvious question. If we can take the sheen off a victory, can we actually remove the victory entirely and still have a satisfying ending? One where the protagonist fails or dies? Surely readers must hate that. Well, let's take a look at the literary canon. In 1984, after his torture, Winston is broken. He offers Julia up for torture, finally admits that 2 + 2 = 5 and that he, indeed, loves Big Brother. In Of Mice and Men, George does the one thing that we've been praying for the entire book that he won't have to do. These are devastating endings to beloved books that have been pressed into the hands of friends with the words, "It destroyed me," said as if it were the highest praise imaginable. So how does this work? Okay, so you just kill off your character at the end and force them to face their failure? Easy enough. Well, not quite. I think tragic endings that resonate with readers usually fulfill 2 conditions. First, the tragedy must be inevitable from character, not something that's imposed by the author or the plot, but grown from who these people are at the start of the story, so that if you reread the book, you can trace this impending doom back through every choice the character makes. Secondly, the tragedy destroys the person while reaffirming the meaning of the story. In 1984, Winston loses, but the answer to the book's question on what totalitarianism is only works because he loses. George pulls the trigger and it answers everything that the book has posited about the nature of mercy and friendship. A tragic ending is one that answers a book's question honestly, where the answer is no. No, a man can't escape from the unyielding power of a massive system. No, the world doesn't bend for 2 honest, hard-working men. And readers, as it turns out, will love a book that tells them no, so long as that no is something that we all understand to be the truth. 4. The circular ending. Now let's move from what an ending says to the shape it takes, starting with the oldest shape there is, and we're talking about the story that ends where it starts. The Hobbit announces it in its own subtitle, There and Back Again. Bilbo ends up where he started, in that same hole in the ground, visibly no longer the same Hobbit who left it. Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca starts with our narrator arriving as a timid young bride at her husband's estate for the very first time. And it also ends with a return to Mandalay. But this time, the house is ablaze after she and her husband uncover the truth behind his first wife's death. And we can see that our narrator is now wiser, stronger. So why does this circular ending satisfy so deeply? Well, it's because this return trip is in some way a measurement. Change can be invisible if there isn't a fixed point to measure it against. And by carrying the reader back to that opening image, that same location, the same ritual, that same line of dialogue, we're able to see exactly how much that character has changed over the course of the book. And this type of circular ending is so reliable that it's baked into some of today's most popular story structures. Save the Cat, the screenwriting framework that half of Hollywood seems to run on, makes its literal first and last beats opening image and final image, and instructs the writer that there should be a deliberate mirror of one another. The before and after picture of the whole story, if you will. The hero's journey is usually represented with a circle ending with our hero back home. These are different frameworks, but with the same ancient storytelling insight. The end of the road is also the beginning, seen with new eyes. So the practical tip for your manuscript: go and read your first scene right now and ask yourself, what could the final scene rhyme with? Is there an image in there, an object, a line, a place? You don't need to put a mega fine point on it all around, just one deliberate echo, and then your reader's memory will draw that circle in for you. You can even reverse engineer it, take something from your ending and seed it in that first chapter. Quick pause, if you're enjoying this, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. We put out videos every single week on the craft and business of writing books. Okay, back to the list. 5. The ambiguous ending. This is the most dangerous entry on this list because if done wrong, an ambiguous ending could lead your readers into believing that you really don't know what you're doing, which could technically be true. It's often the most hated ending in fiction, and the comment section of the internet are a monument to this white-hot hatred. So let's be precise about what separates a good ambiguous ending with a weak one. Let's start with the beloved version, in The Life of Pi, which ends by handing the reader an explicit choice between two accounts of the same survival. The miraculous one, in which our hero survives the ocean with a tiger, and the brutal one, where there's no tiger, and in its place an unfathomable amount of human cruelty. And then it asks in almost as many words, which do you prefer? In a sense, that book makes the reader's choice the ending. The question that the novel asks is about the stories we choose to survive by, and your answer tells you what you, the reader, needs from a story. Or look at Inception's spinning top. We've been told that if he spins this top and it keeps going forever, that means they're in a dream. But we cut to black just as we're about to find out either way. Leonardo DiCaprio's character is now living in a world where he's reunited with his children. One of the questions of the story being, is this a dream? Leo's answer is, he doesn't care to find out. In these examples, the writers know precisely what has been unresolved, and they've made a point of resolving absolutely everything else. The emotional journey is complete, and only a fact remains open. And it remains open because that openness is part of the theme. In the cack-handed version of the ambiguous ending, the writer doesn't choose an ending. They merely leave on a shrug and hope that the reader sees this as deep somehow. If you're drawn to this kind of ending, you need to be ruthless with yourself. See if you can state explicitly why you have left this ending open and why this book is better for it. 6. The Resonant Image. A picture paints 1,000 words, and very often a single image can be more effective than a whole scene full of images shown to you at 25 frames a second. I might be getting lost in my own metaphor here, but what I'm talking about are novels that end in an indelible single image. Cormac McCarthy is incredible at finding these resonant grace notes to his novels. You can find one on the final page of The Road, his post-apocalyptic tale about a father and son moving through a desolate landscape. Right at the end, when the plot is concluded, the father has passed, the boy's fate is settled as he meets new people to live with who seem like they're actually rather kind. And then, in the very last paragraph, we're given this Gatsbyan final image. Once there were brook trout in the streams and the mountains. You could see them standing in the amber current, where the white edges of their fins wimpled softly in the flow. They smelled of moss in your hand, polished and muscular and torsional. On their backs were vermiculate patterns that were maps of the world in its becoming. Maps and mazes of a thing that could not be put back, not be made right again. In the deep glens where they lived, all things were older than man, and they hummed of mystery. It's a memory that doesn't belong to the boy or the deceased man, but perhaps to an omniscient watcher, to McCarthy himself perhaps. It's an image that conjures up so many things. A nostalgia for a time before when the world was full of life and food was abundant. Maybe celebrating the memory of that world while also lamenting that there is no way back. Nothing happens in this paragraph, yet it stays with us. If the question of the book is, will they find salvation in some way, then this image gives us the answer. No, not really, but yes, kind of. Despite our hopes, that ship has sailed. We once had it so good and now it is no more. But at least we could be grateful to have lived somewhere that once contained so much beauty. It's a simple image, but it evokes such complex emotions. And because it is the final moment of the book, the reader realizes that this image means something, and it forces them to make that connection in a stronger way than if you'd dropped in allusions at any other point in the book. And if the reader is able to make that connection themselves, even with the strong guiding hand of the author, it's so much more satisfying. They can even feel smarter for having made that connection, and that feeling is the abiding memory that the reader will take away from your book. Powerful stuff indeed. The door left open. And finally, a type of ending that's really relevant to a lot of working writers watching this right now, because many authors build their careers on writing a series. This is where your book needs to be resolved, but also leave certain story elements unfinished, answering certain questions in a satisfying way while dropping new ones for your next book. Our model for this can be the first Hunger Games book. When that one comes to a close, the games are over. The novel's primary plotty question, will Katniss survive, is answered in full. Yes, she has won the battle with an act of rebellion, but the war is far from over. The capital is not finished with her, and her victory has created a bigger, darker question than what it answered. What now? How is the capital going to get back at her to preserve their status quo? And here I think is the rule for ending any book within a series. Book 1's questions need to be answered in Book 1 completely and satisfyingly if we are to achieve this peak end principle like any other standalone book. The hook for Book 2 needs to be a new question, ideally created in the aftermath of the answer to Book 1. A cliffhanger that simply withholds the resolution the reader was expecting, chopping a story in half to sell it twice. That will almost certainly create a resentment amongst a significant chunk of your readership. Nothing was resolved, they'll write in your user reviews, and in a word of mouth economy, that review can be deadly. So, 7 answers to your story's questions, and all of them are tools at your disposal. And the endings readers love most are often 2 or 3 of these stacked at once. The Great Gatsby's ending, with a description of boats beating against the current borne back ceaselessly into the past, is an image drawn at the end of a closed circle. These categories I've shared exist to be combined. So it's not which of the 7 endings do I need to use, it's what question is my story really asking? And what is the honest answer? And once you have that, ask yourself which of these 7 shapes delivers that answer with the most impact. If you get that right, you can create that experience of someone closing the final page of your book, taking a deep breath in and going, "God damn, that was good." If you've written an ending and you're not sure whether it's answering the right questions, Reedsy's marketplace has over 1,600 experienced editors, including developmental editors, who diagnose this exact thing for a living. The link's in the description. Remember to like this video and smash the subscribe button. I've been Martin from Reedsy, and I'll see you on the shelves.